my great pleasure, and we're very honored to have not only the Deputy Director, Jason Whitted, which is in the back of the room, but also it gives me great pleasure to introduce Judith Dumont, the Director of the Massachusetts Broadband Institute. Can we welcome her, please?
Thanks for having me. It's really, I think, fabulous to come and speak to this group and really start to explore all the things that are possible in partnerships. One of the things that is important for us is making sure that folks in the communities that we're looking to serve with our federal grant know what we're doing. We have community outreach meetings and we get lots of great attendance, but certainly not everyone who needs to know what we're doing. And I think going forward there's a lot that we can do even across the state to really help close the digital divide. So what I'd like to talk to you about is what we're doing today at the Mass Broadband Institute and different programs and initiatives that we have going on. As Jim mentioned, we were created by the Governor Patrick and the legislature back in 2008 with a very simple mission: connect the unconnected. Bring high-speed internet to those residents and businesses and community anchor institutions that don't have access to high-speed internet today. And I know there are some folks here who come from the East, as I do, and the thought of not having high-speed internet is a little bit strange, but there are 47 communities here in Western Mass that actually don't even have access to cable television. And so there are roughly about 60 communities that have limited access. When you go past the infrastructure, you would think, if we build it, they will come. But we know that's not true. 30% of Americans today who have access to the pipes or high-speed internet choose not to adopt or subscribe to those services. And cost plays a factor in that, as does relevance. When we ask citizens across the country why they don't adopt high-speed internet, they say it's not relevant to their lives. And that's a problem. And when you dig deeper, you find that the folks who give that answer tend to be the elderly, the disabled, the low income, and we can't leave these folks behind. So we have to worry about that level of closing the divide as much as making sure the physical plant, putting the pipes on underground or on utility poles. And I actually think that's certainly where mass media can really help and play a big part in that. So talking about network infrastructure, because again that is our first priority, we received federal funding in July of 2010. $45 million, coupled with state investment of $26 million to build what we call Mass Broadband 123. And we named it that way because conveniently we're actually going through 123 communities, all 101 communities in Western Mass and 22 communities along the north central Massachusetts, kind of Route 2, Route 2A. We stop in Ayer, Massachusetts, right past Lunenburg, which I know somebody from Lunenburg is here. And what we'll be building is a sustainable, future-proof, fiber-optic, high-speed backbone. And when I just breaking up what I mean by sustainable and future-proof, the funding that we were able to receive is allowing us to put large pipes, 288 strands of fiber, 144 strands of fiber along the backbone. And just to give you a context for that, today, one strand of fiber would handle all voice traffic in the state of Massachusetts. Of course, I think as you folks all know, once you start transmitting and passing around data and streaming video, that usage goes up. It's also interesting that all the providers today have to scale their networks for about Friday night at 7 o'clock, because that's when everybody is downloading their Netflix for the evening, and that's changed so quickly just over the last couple of years. When I say sustainable, one of the criteria for making sure we got this funding, and certainly one of the criteria of using state bond money, was to make sure that once we built this network, that it was something that could sustain itself, that the revenues coming in not only would take care of the operations, but also the maintenance. When ice storm hits, I know some folks in the audience have been party to the ice storms that we've had here. We've also had tornadoes all of a sudden crop up, and hurricanes. And when those poles get knocked down, it costs to the network providers who are on those poles need to contribute to paying for them. I often say to the federal officials when we talk about our project that so far a year into it, the only thing we haven't had is locusts in terms of problems. But everyone, all the grantees across the country have different issues that we deal with, and we all support each other on that. We are also received matching funds from the Commonwealth's IT division and the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security. So we are very tightly coupled with the state. And in Western Mass today, there are 27 police stations, municipal police stations, that don't have access to the criminal justice information system. They have to make a phone call, which is what they used to have to do, 20 years ago out east. Another 85 have access to the criminal justice information, where they look up mugshots and look up, routine car traffic stops. They have access with very slow technology that doesn't work. And with this partnership, we'll be changing that. And I'm sorry, I wanted to go back and say Mass Broadband 123, not only are we going through 123 towns, we needed to make sure down in Washington that they understood that this was fundamental. This wasn't a nice to have for the folks in Western Mass and Central Mass, that this wasn't like MIT and Harvard and Boston and inside the 128 belt. So, and when we did a lot of interviews during that time, they said, "Come on, Massachusetts, you've got plenty of high-speed internet." And when they think of Western Mass, they think of Tanglewood, and they think of wonderful, beautiful houses. So we needed to make sure that they understood that. When complete in July of 2013, it will be a 1,000-mile network all throughout the region, as well as we'll have two paths that bring us back to Boston along the northern route from Air to Boston, leasing that fiber. Another important thing is we'll be connecting over 1,300 schools, libraries, town halls, police and fire stations, hospitals, and state locations. Those are known as community anchor institutions or CAIs. And when we say connect them, it means that we will, the federal grant allows us to bring fiber into the building and supply the network equipment, the device that the institution would then use to connect their network to. So all of that is included in the federal grant. The institution themselves will have to then purchase whatever type of service they want, whether it's basic internet service, whether it's IPTV or video conferencing or IP telephone. And I'll talk about how they'll do that. Here's the map. This just gives you the squiggly yellow lines are where the network is going. The red area is what is considered underserved by the federal definition. That means that less than 50% of the residents have access. The blue striped or hashed communities are economically challenged communities, either from the state definition, which is a slightly lower threshold, or the federal definition. The big, thick blue lines are federally challenged communities. In the round 2 of the federal stimulus, round 1, we were only able to go to the underserved communities. In round 2, they opened it up and allowed us to go to economically challenged, because they recognize as part of that adoption that those communities are considered served, but they may only have one provider, and so there's really, not a cost competitiveness that we really want to see with these type of networks. So we just passed our first year. I called it the year of procurements, permits, and poll surveys. I spent more time with lawyers than I care to. I love them dearly. They have an important function, but it was mostly about getting the team and the project ready to be built. And I'll talk a little bit about our project team. In the meantime, we also had to sign agreements. This is what's called an aerial fiber build. The network will be going on and attaching to 35,000 utility poles. And I was just at a conference in Ohio for NTIA, National Telecommunications and Information Administration, and that is the largest project of any of these federal stimulus. Pennsylvania has a 60,000 telephone pole utility pole project, but they're doing a method that we think is cheating called overlash. We would do it if we could, which means that you just connect the cable to one that's already there. It's a really tricky process to make sure that there's room on the utility pole for our fiber to go up. And so when I talk about pole surveys, we actually have to go out and look at every utility pole, all 35,000. When you leave here, look at the utility poles. You'll see all kinds of different things up there. We also had to do an environmental assessment of the entire area, not only for environmental protection, but also historical. That was another huge project that we had to take on before we could even start to build. And we've begun to do the work with the pole owners to do the make ready, and we created a community representative team of all 123 communities. And I know we have at least one community rep here from Athol, which is fantastic. They're really our liaison to the towns to help us with a whole variety of things. So we really appreciate their work. This is a really, really aggressive timeline to get this done, and it's federally mandated. And with that said, the governor is even more impatient about it, and he wants it done sooner. And certainly the folks in Western and Central Mass who don't have access today they've been trying to solve this problem for over a decade. And so when we came out and said it's going to be done in 2013, that seemed like a lifetime. For me, a year has gone by in a blink of an eye, but that's another story. So we will continue with the make-ready work and start to put our fiber up once there is room on the poles, and then in the first half of 2013. We'll be rolling out the network in segments, but all pretty close within a 4 to 6 month time frame. And folks ask me, well, when is my community going to be rolled out? And it's a little bit tricky to answer that because it really depends on how fast the make-ready work gets done in that community. And, one stretch of poles could, if it needs to be a new pole set, could really hold it up. So, we have a plan, but it really the work that needs to be done on the utility poles and the acts of nature that we've seen. If we have another rough winter, that could affect the northern region more than the southern region. So it's a constantly shifting based on all kinds of conditions. We are, as Jim said, an economic development agency, and so we needed to bring on partners to build this and run this. So in June, we hired a firm called G4S, and we used Chapter 149A, which is a alternate public construction method, so it's called design build. It was a 26-week process, very intense public process, and they will be responsible for the final design and construction of the network. And some folks in the region have already been, who are affiliated with the anchor institutions, have been contacted by a subcontractor that works for them called Gannett Fleming, because for all of those over 1,300 community anchor institutions, we actually have to go out and inspect the inside and develop a site design from how we're going to get to from the lateral, the pole on the street into the building, and then inside, is there any wiring or anything that needs to be done there? Very, very complex. We also have hired a network operator called Axia. They'll be responsible for managing and sustaining the network, including the physical plant. As I mentioned, they're the ones who will, what they say, will roll a truck when a pole gets knocked down. But they're also responsible for keeping the system up, the network up, monitoring it. They have a network operations center that look for any issues, any slowdowns, just like a commercial internet provider. And I'm sure the folks from Shrewsbury, have a network operations center and understand that. They're also responsible for recruiting retail or last mile providers, because we will sell wholesale services to the private providers. Again, the concept of these open access networks are to make sure that we're not building a monopoly. It needs to be a competitive, or the goal is to have it be a competitive environment, so that individuals and businesses and those anchor institutions have a choice on who they want to provide their service. And when you look at a next generation network, you might have several different providers providing different applications on the network. We've got an interesting, I think, a quite unique arrangement with Axia, in that we're not paying them to run the network. They're paying us for the privilege to run the network and run it as a business. They plan to invest between $35 and $45 million in the region over the next 10 years. Some of that in the operational costs that's when I'm talking about sustainability. It's their responsibility for all the fees that come along with running this network. But they also plan on making extension investments, business case investments. They'll go to a business park. They'll go and build out the network and really help to offset making sure that these community anchor institutions have fair prices. And they also, right now, they have a team, because they have open access networks around the globe. They operate one with the province of Alberta, with the national government of France, regionally in Spain, and with the national government in Singapore. So they were a right fit for us, because they get the public good model, which we thought was extremely important, because once we build this network, the middle mile network, we still have a job to do, which is connect the unconnected. Challenges for the build. People always say, "How's it going?" And every day there's something different. It's a very aggressive timeline for a very complex project that we need parties at the state, federal, and local level to work together. We are blessed with the support that we have with the governor, the administration, and the state legislator, as well as at the federal. Our federal delegation is very active in this. Congressman Over out here in Western Mass, he actually came to our offices in Westboro to make sure we were wanted to know what it was we were doing. So Senator Kerry has done things on our behalf. So we have a very, very active delegation. Make-ready costs, working with those pole owners. That's a challenge. It's a challenge across the country. I think we have a good working relationship with Verizon, Western Mass Electric, and National Grid, but we need them to continue to work with us in order to get this done. And just reaching out to the large number of community anchor institutions and the residents and businesses to make sure they understand what it is that we're doing and what it means to them, and what we're providing and what we're not providing, and doing the site design. And I think getting this out on public access television will be a really big help. So that's the infrastructure project. Last mile is something that we can build this middle mile, and it can be the perfect and most beautiful middle mile network, but if it doesn't connect to citizens or businesses, then we haven't succeeded. So we are doing quite a bit on that front. We're analyzing the region, the pockets of unserved communities, and developing a plan for coming out for how we're going to close that digital divide. And there's some communities or some areas where the fact that we're running the middle mile through the population center should lower the economic hurdle for a private sector provider to come in and get the job done. And then there's the other side of the spectrum, where it's so remote, the population density is so small that we're really going to need heavy state funding to make that happen. And part of the bond funds that we were provided back in 2008 will be used to do that. And really we're sort of developing a portfolio of those communities and how best to do that. Things that we've already done is we've worked with the Department of Conservation and Recreation and granted licenses to 3 fire towers. Fire towers are great mechanisms for putting wireless equipment on, and for you having a wireless internet service provider use those towers to reach some of the communities. And so we're actually in the process of rolling out another set of another RFP process to grant additional towers. The first set were successful, and we're already starting to see residents being served both in Mount Borden and I believe Mount Lennox. Really, and so going back to our roots, we need to look at how can we catalyze private sector investment to finish that job. We also gave a series of grants, which I'll talk about, and we're always looking for additional funding. In June, we granted a total of $335,000, 3 planning and 5 deployment grants. Planning grants are, we gave folks money to study how that community would solve their problem. Working with, what we wanted to do was have providers and communities work together on what's the best solution for that community or set of communities. In deployment grants, same thing, we wanted the providers to work with the communities. And the grants that we're providing will make service available to 1,000 homes if they choose to adopt. And we're really looking at these to create blueprints for other communities, not just in Western Mass or in the unserved areas, but across the state. We're working with the folks down on the Cape who also have a federal grant, and it can be for any of the communities. Here's just an example of what the awards are. We gave awards to serve Savoy and Holly, Ashfield, Terringham, Princeton, and Warwick. And then planning grants, there's an organization, a community-based organization of 47 towns called Wired West that are planning to band together and build a fiber-to-the-home network. So we participated in funding that organization to keep their plans moving forward, as well as the town of Leverett and Royalston to see what made sense for those communities. Again, as we talk about broadband availability and adoption, we are the state entity for what's called mapping and planning. We participate, we provide data that to the FCC as part of their national broadband map. And if you don't know that, you can go on the FCC site or you can go on our organization, type in your address, and see what providers think services are provided there. Part of the project is to refine that and really understand where those pockets of need are. We're using this information as we are assessing and developing our portfolio strategy. And so, again, that's something that that is available and interactive on our website. Here's a static map. The purple, no surprise, in Western Mass, in Eastern Mass, represents that there's a combination of DSL, cable, and fiber. It's probably hard to see, but over in the hill towns, you see a lot of brown, where they either have DSL only, and the white space is where not a lot of any type of broadband exists. And this is for wireline. We also do it for wireless. On adoption, we think there's a ton that needs to be done. We were able last year to apply for and receive 2 very specific grants, and these are both statewide grants. As I mentioned, some of the folks who don't adopt broadband fall across demographics that we don't want to leave behind. And so one of the grant options was to create an application that a software application, an online application that would make it easier for these individuals to find value in this. And so we applied for and received funding to build a veterans portal. And we chose the veterans because, unfortunately, they cross all those demographics. There are homeless veterans. There are, veterans who have low income. There are lots of veterans coming back today from the wars today are considered disabled with traumatic brain injury or post-traumatic shock. And so we're working in partnership with the Department of Veterans Services, the state entity, as well as Home Base, which is part of Mass General Hospital, to build a portal that will make it as easy as possible for veterans returning or veterans who are living in the state to gain access to their benefits, what benefits are available to them, because we've run focus groups and it's very, very challenging. We have some of the best benefits of any state, but I think somebody called it a sea of goodwill, but it's very, very difficult to navigate. So we will be rolling this out in Q1 of 2012, and I'd love to talk to you guys about how you might help make sure we get that information out to the veterans across the state. We also receive funding to work with community development corporations across the state to help small businesses. One of the things that we know is that, again, they might get free software or free computers, but then they don't really know what to do with it. And so we'll be able to help. We're going to work with 4 CDCs from across the state who will in turn each work with 10 small businesses to help them develop a technology plan for how they can better use the internet. And those are just the start of adoption programs. I think digital literacy is a big issue that what those folks who don't subscribe today, all they hear about is on the news is bad things that happen when people go on the internet, and we need to turn that around and show them and provide training to help them understand how to safely use the internet and what benefits and value they can gain. And as I said, I would love to partner with this organization because I think you can help us quite a bit in getting that message out. So I think that's the end of my prepared remarks. Jim, I hope that wasn't too lengthy.
No, it's fine if you have time for a few.
I certainly do, absolutely.
I love the last part of it, especially where you would like to work with us, and I think a lot of us do have connections already with. There's a veteran show that's done in Central Mass. We are that show. But there are so many groups that we are all interconnected with, and I'm wondering if you could suggest a way, or who do we talk to? How do we get ourselves recognized as an anchor institution, so that we could possibly get some federal funding as one of those? And
yeah, great question. From the NTIA grant, it wasn't considered. PEG stations weren't considered community access institutions, community anchor institutions. But I think one of the things that we should do collectively is, work within our communities, work with us, work with you. How far are you from the route that we're building, and how, with a combination of funding, do we go about getting that connection made? Axia can play a part in that, our network operator. And so I think it's probably not a blueprint for each community. I think it's sitting down and understanding. You guys were talking earlier that there are, some have contracts with your town, some don't. And so it's probably different in each community, but I think it's sitting down, understanding how far you are from the network, what your needs are, what funding capabilities you have, and how we go about putting that together. And do you know of any additional funding, through your organizations that are available at the federal level? We're always looking for additional funding, and not just from NTIA, which funded the first one, but Small Business Administration. We're very active and interested in the FCC's Universal Service Fund reform, and what that could bring for additional funding. I think we're going to know here pretty soon, before the end of the year, what that change from funding rural plain old telephone systems to funding broadband will mean. And it probably won't give us everything that we want. Massachusetts is what's considered a donor state, which means that Universal Service Fund, we all pay into it on our phone bills each month. And it goes in and does wonderful programs. It does E-rate for schools and libraries, helps subsidize those programs. But we are a donor state, and when it comes to this one pocket where they go to build out rural telephone, I think we send out $160 million, somewhere around there, a year, and get somewhere under $5 million. We get $2 million back. Jason says we got $2 million back. Some of the work that we've done, Senator Kerry, in testifying yesterday, just mentioned that he really believes that there should be some leveling on that, and so we're very supportive. And you get a little bit of that money in each year, you can do a lot of very good things. Yes.
I see you've tapped Homeland Security for Mass. Have you done federal? Because some of the public access stations in the smaller communities are departments of town government.
Yeah.
And we do emergency service messaging and information, and maybe that's a way to tap.
Yeah, no, we haven't. So we should. I am not proud. I will look for money under every rock. So I think that's a great suggestion. And again, that may be something that you can educate us on, and then together we can see how it can be done. Yes.
I'm asking this from the community rep point of view, but they might be interested here. Are you guys working still to develop a list of last mile providers?
Yes.
Available, and I think you said at the end, in fall of this year, you were going to have by the end of this year.
Yeah.
Early 2012.
Yeah, Marie, I'm glad you asked that. A couple of things on that. Axia has already signed up for providers that have said, the network's not built, but we're committing that we will provide service on that network. Axia will be holding a provider summit later this fall to really make sure that folks know, what it means to be a provider. And of those 4, which I think is very interesting, 2 are in region that have been working in the region already, and 2 are from outside the region, which I think is great because we need more people to come in. And so, and we had put I-91 fiber in the ground, along with the Mass Department of Transportation, 55 miles of fiber in the ground from Connecticut to Vermont. And that project we're just connecting it to 1 Federal Street in Springfield, which is the internet point of presence. And we'll be ready to light that up in November, meaning that it will become operational. And we've already got a first customer lined up on it. And to start, that will be just commercial traffic until it's tied into anything else. But there's still a need for that, and so that's a huge milestone for us. But we hope to attract new service providers, those that operate in the east, that operating in the west hasn't been possible, as well as from surrounding states who want to come in and run and work in an open access network. Other questions? Shy group, Jim.
Well, I want to thank you very much. Let's have a round of applause, please, for Judy Dumont. Thank you, Judy, so beautiful. Thank you.